Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing and to our witnesses for being here today. Today's hearing makes clear for all of us that energy independence is critical for our national security and our economic strength. On day one of his administration, President Trump made clear that he will restore the United States to a position of energy dominance, reversing dangerous and failed anti-energy policies of the Biden-Harris administration that forced us to rely upon our adversaries for energy needs while driving up costs for everyday Americans. I appreciate the testimony and insight from our witnesses today about the actions Congress can take to help unleash our energy production, restore national security, and lower costs for my constituents in Florida and Americans across the nation. Mr. McCown, I'd like to return to your testimony. The Biden administration's fixation in particular on EV mandates ignored the economic realities and geopolitical considerations of the manufacturing supply chain. We know that China exploits their dominance over critical mineral processing facilities and the supply chain for EV manufacturing. We've also seen firsthand in my district and other places how disastrous and inadequate these vehicles can be in the event of extreme weather. Last year, you penned a letter to President Biden along with 16 former military and national security experts highlighting concerns about how the rush to electrify our transportation industry will further deepen our nation's reliance on an adversarial nation like China. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to include this letter into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. McCown, would you expand on the purpose of this letter and why a substantial community of national security experts maintain concerns about domestic policies that effectively mandate electric vehicles?
Sure, Mrs. Lee, thank you for the question. Yeah, look, I'm not anti-EV, I own one. But it works in some instances better than it works in other instances. It is a great around-the-town car. It is great if you have a wall box in your house and can charge overnight. But that EV battery came from China. The raw materials came from China. We're at a huge deficit when it comes to being able to produce, outside of the Chinese supply chain, the rare earth materials, critical minerals that we need, number one. Number two, while they're an important component of our overall transportation fleet, it's not the only answer, and EVs are not the only answer for everything. They just don't work in circumstances. I've operated them in Alaska. I've driven them across country. Longer conversation for a different time. They're just not quite ready for mass application. And further, to electrify the energy system, the electricity grid, as Mr. Peters has pointed out, we've been unable to add power to the grid for decades. The grid is not ready to handle that load, and the fixation about banning gas would even push more, natural gas would push even more onto the electric grid. It's just not smart policy.
I also noted in your written testimony, you included the statement that attempts to demand an energy transition cannot be willed by policymakers. Physics beats policy every day. Tell us what you mean by that statement.
Sure. There are promising technologies. We talked about geothermal from the gentleman from Massachusetts that has strong promise. We haven't yet talked about hydrogen. That also offers some strong promise. But, these technologies take time. I'd like to have a fusion reactor tomorrow. It's not ready yet. And we can't mandate the deployment of fusion where it doesn't exist. We can't mandate the deployment of certain technologies by picking winners and losers through tax credits, incentives, or straight up taxes to change the real world. We need to invest in R&D, and we need to be patient, and we can keep moving toward a cleaner future while not losing affordability or reliability.
You also mentioned twin goals of supply and resilience as being part of energy security overall. I'd like to ask specifically about the resilience piece and what you can share with us on the types of cyber threats that pose a risk to the security of our energy infrastructure.
Yes, I mean, it's obvious that the more interconnected we become, the more vulnerable we are to outside actors and malicious threats. We've seen that with the Colonial Pipeline system. We've seen that with other infrastructure systems. And another reason why we need I'm sorry, we need not only resilience, but backup systems, secondary systems. We can't put all of our eggs in one bag, and electrifying everything is putting all your eggs in one bag right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.